All right, everybody, welcome back to the Rigs Real Estate Show. I've got a good friend of mine here, Brian Ellwood. He's found a financial freedom, found that path to success through single-family houses, and he's here to tell his story today. So that, hopefully you can get some inspiration from that. And welcome to the show, Brian.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess to kick things off, why don't we go ahead and just go through your story? How you got started in real estate, and we can take the conversation from there.
Sure, man. So I basically got started almost 10 years ago, and I had the corporate 9-to-5 grind, sitting in a cubicle, and hated my life. Basically hated my boss. I wanted more freedom with my time. I'm sure a lot of you out there can vibe with that story. And I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. I wish I had a more unique story, but it's pretty cookie cutter, the same as everyone else. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I realized that instead of just earning money to spend it on bills, there was an extra step you could add where you earn money and do something with it that passively pays your bills. Because the book doesn't really say real estate is the only way. But that was a huge epiphany for me. And, I quit my job, went and worked at a grocery store just because I needed more mental bandwidth to try and focus on something else. And so I was the produce guy, washing lettuce and stuff. And but I was I'm going to figure out this passive income thing. And, sometimes when you have an intention, the world kind of shows up with an option for you. And this was in the form of a guy that I met who came in the grocery store all the time. He was a flipper. He taught me how to find deals. And I worked for him for a year and found 8 deals, and he paid me $1,000 per deal as a bird dog fee. So my tax return that year was for $8K.
Nice.
Big bala.
Yeah, and by a flipper, you're talking he was flipping houses. That was his full-time job.
Yep.
Yeah.
Fix and flip specifically. They did real nice rehabs in Nashville, Tennessee. And so after mentoring under him for a year, I decided to go out on my own. And remember, I still wanted passive income. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, but everyone told me well, you don't have a lot of cash, Brian. You should probably start out wholesaling. So I started out wholesaling. I got totally sidetracked by that, and I got into fix and flipping. We built this huge wholesale / fix and flip business. We were doing over $1 million a year in revenue. We had 8 employees. I was a CEO. I was working my ass off every day, managing my team, and I still didn't have any rental properties. Imagine that. It was pretty ridiculous.
Right, and you're doing hundreds of transactions.
Yeah.
And they're just going by your desk, you're signing off on them, but not keeping anything.
And I was literally still too scared to keep something, even though that sounds ridiculous. It was so easy to flip paper and get something under contract and then just say, here, take my position over. But the idea of I didn't really know how to estimate rehab costs or manage a contractor or find out if a house had foundation issues or mold. And so I was scared to do it. And, but eventually the frustration of that job just the job I created for myself just built up to where I was I've got to do something different. This is not what I wanted to do with my life. I'm tied to this business I created. That's when we aggressively got into buying rentals, and we started buying single-family rentals in Nashville. We got to 2 or 3 dozen rentals, me and my business partner, and then I looked at, the business, and I was wow, I can actually pay my bills with the money from this little rental portfolio I've got, because my expenses were still really low, even though we were making pretty good money wholesaling. And so I quit. I shut down the wholesaling business, and now I just teach other people how to get into single family, specifically long distance. I live in Denver, right down the street from Collin, and I invest in Tennessee and Alabama. My passion's always been teaching, education. So this is what I love to do, and the rentals are just how I handle my finances. But that's kind of my story.
Yeah. There's some great things in there that I kind of want to unpack. My listeners by now are familiar with transactional real estate and why, I avoid it personally. I don't think it's the right answer for oil and gas professionals who are looking to diversify and get rid of some of that volatility from our industry, because transactional real estate is just that. It's transaction after transaction after transaction. It's your ability to make and create all these transactions. And the day you stop, the second you stop doing that, the income stops, right? And, if you already have a full-time job in the oil and gas industry, the answer is not creating another job, right? And also think of the taxes you were paying during that time on those wholesaling fees, on those flipping fees. It's ordinary income in the eyes of the IRS. You don't get any real tax breaks from that, right? So let's talk. The other thing I want to talk about is just to put a reference for the people listening out there. These years were what, 2012 through 14, where you were kind of figuring this out?
Yeah, 2011 was like the first year I got into wholesaling.
Yeah. So just think of some of the deals that you probably passed on that would be like, what kind of equity would you have on stuff that you passed your desk, 3-4 times a day, that you weren't keeping for yourself, you were giving away for that wholesaling fee. What would that be worth to you today, right?
Oh man. It was like I'd find a deal for 30 and I'd wholesale it to an investor for 40 or something.
Yeah.
And now that house would be worth like 250 if I had kept it.
Yeah.
And I did so many of those deals, but I didn't know about like using other people's money to take down deals. I thought I had to literally have like $30,000 in cash to buy that. I didn't know about seller financing or private lending or the Burr method. And so I was so confused. But yeah, I mean, I'd have like multiple millions of dollars in equity if I had just sat on those deals.
Yeah.
If I knew what I know now and I could go back in time.
Right. So it's interesting that you did learn that lesson, and now you kind of you dove into the rental portion of that. Once you built that up, you decided that your passion, what you wanted to follow, was helping other people get started in that. So let's maybe talk about that for a minute. When you get someone who is fresh to real estate investing, like what's the first thing you tell them? What's the first step they should be looking at?
The very first step is market selection. It's really important now because it's so hard to find deals. Like I think you and I were talking about some markets in Arkansas the other day and how the price point is just inherently so much lower, even for like A-level neighborhoods, that it's so much easier to make a cash flowing rental. And so many people that I talk to are so green that they don't even know like what the term 1%er is, which is rent divided by all-in price should be 1% or greater. And so they're in like San Diego trying to buy rental properties. And they're just like,
let's put some numbers to the 1%er real quick. That's basically saying if it's a $100,000 house, you want $1,000 per month in gross rents or more. Yeah. That's what we mean by a 1%er. And really, like with today's market, you should be looking at 1.2% or more, just to make sure that you're covered on those expenses and actually cash flowing. And I totally agree with you. I talk to a lot of people, 3 to 5 people a week that they're like, I want to get started in real estate, but they're only looking in their backyard. They're so limited to, whatever town they live in. And most of the time, to be quite honest, the towns they live in are really not great rental markets, right? No. Maybe the population isn't growing, or it's a $400,000 house that rents for $2,000 a month. Guys, that's a 0.5%er. You shouldn't be looking at that. Get out of your comfort zone. And really, like the comfort zone thing, it's an excuse, is what it is, right? Because where's your money better spent? It's investing in these better markets out there where you can get 1.2, 1.4% rentals. Live where you want to live, guys, but invest where the money makes sense. And you told me that like day one when I was looking at this, getting into real estate. And guys, I should have mentioned that in the intro. Brian is really the person that, when I first was looking for an outlet to, find a way out of the volatility of our industry, Brian is the one that kind of showed me, mentored me, got me motivated and excited about real estate and, all the benefits that can come from it. So, where I was going with that was you gotta, and you told me this from day one, you gotta get out of your comfort zone and don't look in your backyard. And that's why I ended up looking at like Kansas City, Fort Worth, San Antonio, these great rental markets. I don't live there, but that doesn't matter. And I accepted that from day one. Now, a lot of people have been looking for 2 years trying to get a rental in, Denver or San Diego, like you said. And, it's just not going to happen. The numbers will never be there. And there is other strategies, right, for investing in a market like that. But what we're talking about here is just stabilized, cash flow, solid metrics, and that's what you got to look for. So you're saying number one choice or number one decision you did make when you first get started, select that market.
Yeah, because you can't like everyone says, well, I want to focus on learning how to build a team, but where are you going to build the team? What city do you need contractors and property managers and private lenders and bankers and wholesalers and realtors and all that? You need to know where you're looking. And so, yeah, if you haven't picked your market, or if you're in a market that's way too expensive or competitive, then your first step is to pick a new market or pick your first market, and don't do anything else until you do that. It's don't listen to a podcast that tells you how to analyze deals, because you can figure that out. It's high school math class or something, or easier to learn how to analyze a deal. It's like middle school math, right? So, if you're the big thing is if you're a serious action taker, you can become disciplined enough to put the blinders on and knock out one step at a time. And I coach people, not to, promote myself, but as a coach, what I do is line the dominoes up for people. So they're not trying to figure out step 8 when they don't have step 1 figured out. And so, yeah, picking a market, when I work with people, my private clients, we spend the first 2 weeks on market selection and looking at all the different criteria that goes into a market. We can talk about that if you want to or not. But
yeah, we should probably touch on that a little bit. But I think there's a lot of important things that Brian's saying right there that you guys should be, taking notes on. Is he's telling you about lining up dominoes. He's telling you step by step. We've talked about this before on the show, not getting that analysis paralysis by looking just at the peak of the mountain, man, I got to get all the way up there. Okay, well, what foot is in front of the other, right? If your right foot's in front of your left foot, move your left foot so that it's in front of your right. And you do that enough times and you're at the top of the mountain. And that's really what a good coaching program, good mentor program, a lot of that value comes from understanding what steps to do first and really just systematizing things, getting rid of the clutter, getting clarity, and, taking those steps. And the other big part of that is accountability, right? Because if you join a program, there's going to be people in the program that you're collaborating with, and you have accountability partners from there. But
totally.
Yeah, now getting back on track, really, let's talk, if you had to pick 5 things, I know I probably have 25 things that I look at to decide if, something's a good market or not. What would be your top 5?
Well, the rent to price ratio, like we talked about. So, if you hopped on Zillow and you looked at the cheapest deals in the market, if you literally look at everything that's listed, just sort it low to high. If you're not seeing stuff for under $100,000 in that market, I'm guessing you're going to have trouble creating cash flow there. If you look at a market where every house is $150K or more, the cheapest stuff, those houses will not rent for $2,000, like a $150K house. The houses in Denver, the rent for $2K costs, $600,000 to buy. So you're not going to be able to get $2,000 rent for a $150,000 house. And so rent to price ratio, you should be seeing at least 1%ers on the MLS. You're not going to buy those, but they're a good indication that you'll get better deals off market. The next one I think that's probably most important is economic strength and diversity. When people buy stocks, they're looking for the next Facebook or Google, what's really going to pop and make them lots of money. And Nashville did that for me. Nashville made me a ton of money in equity over all the rentals I bought there. And I really just got lucky. I didn't know anything about market research back then. But Nashville ended up being one of the best markets for real estate over the last decade in terms of appreciation and companies opening up there and people moving there. You're looking for markets that are gentrifying. Another way to understand what gentrification is, in my opinion, is just is it getting cool, basically? Are breweries and coffee shops and restaurants popping up? If it's getting cool, then you're going to make a lot of money there. If you would have invested in Denver or Austin, Texas, or Portland, Oregon, or Nashville, Tennessee, any of those cities that are quote unquote on the map back in the day, you would have made a ton of money. The same way people that bought single family in San Francisco made millions and millions of dollars on one house or two houses. So rent to price ratio, and then economic strength and diversity. Another one I'll mention is population size. I don't like to invest in towns that are less than 100,000 people. Like how when you go to a small town, you can't find any good restaurants to go eat at. Well, you also can't find like contractors and property managers and stuff and deals and wholesalers and everything that is easy with just less people.
Yeah.
There's just less going on.
Right. And if you do find one or two, maybe they're not great, and then you have no other options, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're already invested in that market. Property management's a huge thing for that. If property management doesn't work out and it's a one-horse town, you're going to be in trouble. Yeah, exactly.
And then the last two would be, the last three real quick. Is there an active real estate investor community? Because you really tap that community, like the Nashville RIA Club. I'm always in that Facebook group, and it's a paid thing. And I'm like, hey, I need a contractor in this area. Hey, who's the best real estate attorney? Which title company's charging the least? Who uses this company for note servicing or whatever? And there's a lot of guys in there that have more experience than me, and it's like my private little mentorship club. And then the other two are vacancy rates. Like I look for like 5 to 6% or less. And then how landlord friendly a state is huge.
Yeah.
Everyone loves the Southeast because it's so landlord friendly, and you definitely want to look at that.
Right. Yeah. Especially with everything that's going on right now with, rent control on the coast.
Yeah.
Evictions stick to those. Right. Yeah. And there are lists. You can just Google landlord friendly states and you can find that list. And I would honestly suggest just Googling that and filter from there, right?
Yeah, that's true. You might as well start with that.
Yeah, you look at the states that I invest in, you invest in, they're all top 15 in landlord-friendly scores. And that's important. And, they also all have the economic drivers that are going for them too. Like you said, job diversity, that's huge. Las Vegas looked like a great market on paper. COVID hit, and, 40% of their economy is hospitality, and they're getting crushed right now because of that. So, that industry diversity piece is a big part of this. So guys, like that's all stuff you need to be thinking about when you're selecting your market. What's the market size? Is it growing? Is there job growth? Is there job diversity? Crime, I'm sure you would mention in your top 5. You can't avoid crime, but obviously you don't want to be in an area where you wouldn't feel comfortable walking around on your own, right? And that maybe that's a great segue into the next step. Once you select that market, you would suggest that people probably fly out there and do a quick tour, right? What would you do on that tour?
Yeah, you can fly out if you want to. I wouldn't say it's absolutely necessary. It's kind of up to the person. But the next piece is, because you might pick like Huntsville, Alabama or something, but there's like 3 or 4 great zip codes in Huntsville to invest in, and maybe 4, 5, or 6 to stay away from. So you need to know what those are for the market that you pick. So you just have to dial more in on zip codes, neighborhoods, where are other investors investing, and then that sort of finalizes the market piece. If you can say this is a great market and it has certain zip codes and neighborhoods with like C-class properties or better, because like you said, you could find a market with a lot of those indicators, but the crime is so high that like Memphis, Tennessee has always been actually a great rental market, but there's neighborhoods you want to stay out of,
right?
And there's lots of them there that like there's the vacancy rates and the repairs would be way too high for you to be a landlord there, and so
Yeah, I mean, like you said, areas like Memphis, there's great parts of town where you can, make a great return on your investment. Crime is not an issue. And there's parts of town where you want to avoid, right? And it comes back to, would you walk around at night through that neighborhood? And, if the answer is no, you should really be questioning that. A great piece of actionable advice would be, and I'm sure we'll get into this about building your team later, but reaching out to property management in that area, whatever market you're looking at, and asking them what areas they flat out wouldn't take a rental in. Because, for instance, in Fort Worth, where I invested, my property management company that I reached out to, they had a map literally of places, and it was by zip code, I'm pretty sure. It might have been more granular than that, where they were like, we don't really want to manage rentals in these areas. And it was perfect. I was like, thank you, because that narrows down my list. I don't have to waste my time analyzing or looking at a property that doesn't fit this map, because guys, there's a reason that they don't want to manage a property in that area. And so PMs, property managers, they have great lists and know where to stay away from in a market. So maybe that's a good segue into building the team. Is that the next step that you would think?
Yeah, and I didn't really fully answer your question of like, do you fly out there or not? Whether or not you fly out there, you want to hone in on the different zip codes and neighborhoods, and then you want to start building a team. And that could be said to be better done. It would be better done in person. But there's so many tire kickers in real estate that those property managers and contractors like have already met tons of people who never did anything, you know? So they're not going to be super stoked about going out to lunch with another newbie, you know what I mean? If you did fly to town, you could also just join the local RIA group and get some contractor referrals. Like if I was going to go into a brand new market and I needed a contractor and a property manager, I would just roll with the contractor and property manager that came the most recommended by the other experienced investors in that market. Most likely, if those investors are having good results with them, you're not going to like be that disappointed. And those decisions are not permanent. It's kind of like a sports team. Like, you know, you might fill up a roster and start the season off, and then you find out that, you know, this guy playing fullback or whatever sucks, and so you kick him and get a new guy.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like that with your real estate team. You know, you might use a property manager for your first 2 deals, and then you're like, I don't really like them. So on your 3rd deal, you find a new one, and if they go great, you just give the first 2 properties to the new person. And, you know, so you don't have to overthink team and over scrutinize people. But that is the next step. Once you have your market down and you have a very like bare bones team, which honestly, it's just contractor, property manager. Those are the 2 like make or break team members. Then you just move on to finding deals, because that's the big like bottleneck that everybody has right now.
Yeah. And just to further explain, when he's saying a RIA, that's a real estate investor association group. And you can just look on Facebook. If your market's big enough, there's probably 3 Facebook groups that are RIAs for a certain market, right? And just go in there and post a question like, hey, who's a good property manager that you guys have had success with? So narrow your list down that way. And once you have, you know, some leads on property management and a contractor, because like you said, that's another good make or break. You want really good contractors, especially if you're doing these heavy rehabs, to force a lot of equity in. And once you have those 2, then you can move on to, you know, the next members of your team, which would be
after contractor and property manager. Yeah, the other ones aren't that important. It's like if you want deals from wholesalers, you need to meet wholesalers. If you might want a realtor to help you with comps, and then a title company, which kind of ties in with title attorney, because title companies all have like a title attorney that heads it up for legal advice, contracts, and things like that. I'm trying to think who else you would need. You need like, I personally have a CPA, a really good real estate CPA, and a real estate bookkeeper. And that has been huge. I wouldn't worry about this. Again, guys, put the blinders on. But like when you start to scale, you know, one of my students asked me the other day, he was like, I'm keeping up with all my expenses like on a spreadsheet. And he was like paying for stuff out of all these different like credit cards because he wanted the points. I was like, by the time you have to do your taxes, man, you're going to be screwed, because you're going to be going back through all those statements and trying to, you know, it's easier to just like give a bookkeeper access and let them do the paper trail side so you can focus on acquiring more. But yeah, that's down the road, and that's really all I can think of for team building.
Yeah, we may be getting too into the weeds. With
reel it in.
Yeah, reel it in. So I mean, once you start with your property manager and your contractor, you should be looking at deals. How would you suggest, you know, when you're first getting started, how would you suggest going to find deals to start analyzing? And we'll get to analyzing here in a minute, but you know, where do you suggest people go first to look at deals?
Wholesalers have always been a great source of deals. Wholesaler, if you don't know what that is, it's what I used to do, and you know, I said it in my story, but it's people that just go out and hustle up deals. They're just out hustling for deals all day long. and then they bring you the deal on a silver platter. They want to assign the contract over to you for a fee. In some markets, that works. Right now, as we record this in 2020, it's gotten a little too ridiculous to work with wholesalers a lot of the time because they won't give you like an inspection period or anything. They want immediate, non-refundable earnest money. That doesn't fit with my due diligence process. So I do direct to seller marketing. You know, I pull lists of absentee owners. I send them letters, postcards. I have studied good copywriting, so I understand like how to enter the conversation that goes on in the seller's head. So there's some nuances to direct to seller marketing. There's lots of ways you can do that, but I've found that that's the best avenue. Now, some markets, like people are still getting deals on the MLS. I've personally never bought a deal off the MLS because I've always just found it cheaper and easier to go direct to seller.
Yeah. By MLS, he means, you know, Zillow, Realtor.com.
Listed properties.
Listed properties,
Yep.
yeah. By a wholesaler, you know, you're going out and finding these wholesalers. You may go to Facebook in your market and look up, you know, Nashville wholesalers Facebook group, and then, you know, people will be posting deals in those Facebook groups, and that's where you kind of find these off market, you know, kind of under the table deals where the wholesalers have gone in and done a lot of the legwork. You know, they sent out a mailer, the homeowner called them, and they got the deal under contract, and they're just assigning that contract to an investor. And, you know, that ultimately is how you get a better deal than you would just finding something off the MLS.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I guess if you do start looking at deals, analyzing them, what are several things that you would suggest people look at there?
And another real quick thing I failed to mention was property managers are a good source of deals. One of my clients got his first three properties from calling property managers, and he got them with seller financing terms too. And I feel like you either have to hustle and grind right now to get deals via like property managers, wholesalers, you know, making offers on everything that's on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace and everything, or you direct market to sellers and take the calls or have someone else take the calls like I do.
Yeah.
That's
a great point. I'm really glad you said that because that works even all the way up to, you know, institutional commercial properties that I invest in. We've gotten, you know, a 243 unit deal from a property manager that just knew that we were buying that type of asset class.
Wow.
And let us know that this person told them they wanted to sell, and it never hit the market or anything like that. The PM, you know, we handled the transaction. And it was, you know, a $10 million purchase, and I'm just saying that it works, you know, all the way from a $30,000 house to a $10 million, you know, investment grade property. So talking to the PMs, you know, that's why it's number one on your list, right, for building that team.
Yeah. And the biggest thing, maybe the biggest pitfall I probably see in every single person that's trying to be successful is they're just not making enough actual offers. I've found that I have to make 10 offers to get one deal. You know, so if I want a deal a month, I've got to make 2.5 offers a week. It literally won't happen. Like, guys, if you are out there listening to this and you're saying, I've been trying to find a deal, it's been so hard. Let me ask you this. How many offers have you made? And I would bet the answer is probably 0 or 1 or 2. Mm-hmm. No offense, but that's just the case for most people. And if you make 0 offers, like, how many deals could you actually expect to get? 0, right? And so, and I interviewed a guy on my podcast who I was telling you about at lunch, and they have a huge turnkey operation. They buy 3 houses every week. And he said to do that, they have to make 30 offers a week. So they're getting a 10%, you know, like acceptance rate, just like I am. It's pretty common in the industry. So that's the other thing, guys. And that segues into what you asked me is like deal analysis, you know, is, the key is to make an offer. So like if a property manager sends me a lead, right? And I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, they want $70,000 for it. It's a 3-bedroom. Let's see. I don't go deep into analysis. I just go into offer making mode. And then if I can tell that they're, and I'll tell you how I do it in a second, but you're testing to see if they would even entertain an offer around the price point where you need to be. if they want 80 for it, and you run the numbers, and the most you could pay is like 56, then you might as well just go ahead and say, would you consider anything in the 50s? Before you like pull multiple comps and look at every picture and call realtors and have someone drive the neighborhood for you.
Yeah.
That's a big waste of time, like verifying the rent. So literally, guys, what I do, I'll just pull my phone out here to show you, is like whatever the rent is, okay? The rent, let's just say rent's $800. You type 800 in calculator, and if you divide 800 by 0.015, then that gives you 53,000. Okay, now that is, if we talked about the 1% rule. Well, a property at 1.5% is going to likely be a good cash flowing rental. How to determine what would make something a 1.5%er? You divide the rent by 0.015. So if it's $900 a month, 900 divided by 0.015 is 60,000.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so that is your all-in price. That's not your offer. That's the most you could pay for the purchase price plus the rehabs plus the closing costs plus the money costs. So if the rent's 900 and I do my divided by 0.015 thing, and I see 60,000 on the calculator, and then if they want, or if they're telling me, I'll just trust what they say. I'm not gonna send a contractor out there. If they say 10K in repairs, I'm just gonna use that, because I can use it against them if it comes back that it was 20 later and I need a discount.
That's
right?
a good point. Yeah.
And so I'll be like, okay, they said 10K in repairs, so 60,000 minus the 10,000. Now we're at 50. I know it's gonna be like $5,000 in closing costs and money costs. So the most I can offer is 45. And then if they want 58 or 73 or whatever, I'm still going to send them that email and be like, look, I don't mean to offend you. I know you want 70 for this, but like, if I want to hit my cash flow goals, I've literally got to be like in the 40s. I just wanted to let you know that. I appreciate you sending me these emails, sending me these deals.
Yeah.
And keep sending them. And if there's a way to make the deal work, let me know. Now, you don't have to have a 1.5%er. Like, you could probably stretch. It depends. Like, you manually calculate cash flow later. You actually go, well, what are the property taxes? What is like a good vacancy number to use for this neighborhood and repairs? What does insurance actually cost? What is the rent? What's the mortgage going to be? And then you actually try to see over 200 or more net per month. We're talking about a down and dirty, like, quick way to make 10 offers a week. You need something like that.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And even responding with that email with like, hey, this is what I can pay, here's my reasoning behind that, is 99% more feedback than they get from all of their email blasts. So you're already a step ahead in their book because you're actually responding to them. Whether they say, yeah, we can work that, or like, no, it's not going to work on this one at all. That'll be determined, and that's why you make so many offers like that, because there will be 2 or 3 where they're like, well, we can talk about that, and maybe you work from there, and you start doing your further due diligence and everything like that. So I think that's a great tip, is those rough and dirty offers out there.
Yeah.
So what would you say for someone, a listener just getting started, or perhaps hasn't gotten started at all? What's the biggest advice you'd give them, right now?
Well, it's a good question, because there's a couple things. Like, this is going to sound self-serving, but I'm a coach, and I know that I get great results for my clients, and I can see other people that don't have any help just kind of floating around and not knowing what to do next. And so I recommend you get some help. Either you pay a coach, or you find like a local mentor and try to trade time, or at least buy them a bunch of beers. Like, you don't have to hire a coach, but get someone to line the dominoes up for you. But almost before that is like, get really connected with the why behind it. What do you want? Like, if you were to talk to me about us working together and I couldn't tell that you really wanted to do this, I actually wouldn't like take you into my program, because I don't think I'd be able to get you results. I honestly think you would show up and get excited for the first 2 weeks, and then you'd fizzle out, and it would be a waste of, your time and money, basically. The clients that I see that get the best results have the biggest why. Like I did when I was so fed up with like just not having any time and freedom, and I was missing out on all these things in life, and I had to like plant my flag and focus on rentals. One of my clients, Blake, that's already got like 10 houses in his first year. He really needed to quit his job. He really wanted to. He was about to get married. He wanted to be able to provide for his wife and let her start her passion business, and he wanted to start a passion business of his own. He was so focused, so fired up and motivated. And those are the people that I see that get the most results. Like, this is a morbid example, but I heard this. Frank Kern, the internet marketer, he has this old video where he's like, if Osama bin Laden had a machine gun and he pointed it at your family and he said, you have to build a website in the next 24 hours or I'm going to mow you guys down, you'd freaking build a website. You wouldn't like go on YouTube and be like, well, I don't know, I'm building figure out how to like do this. I need to like you would get it done, right? So what people need is a bigger why, a bigger source of motivation. So I would ask you to connect with that. Why do you want this? Why is it important? How is it going to impact your life and your family's life, or your kids' life? You know what I mean? For you to have more freedom and to be happier and to be able to do what you love because you're not tied to a job. Like, the more in touch you can get with that, however you want to do it, through journaling or writing out a vision, the more driven you're going to be. And that's really the difference maker. It's funny, like you think you need real estate advice, but you really need mindset advice. Because is anything we've talked about today that difficult to do? At the end of the day, this isn't rocket science. We're not flying to the moon.
Right, it's addition, it's subtraction.
It's picking up the phone, making calls, it's doing simple math. It's not sitting on your ass and playing video games, which I do sometimes. But it's literally not that hard. What you need is a reason to do it. That's all.
That's huge. Guys, he's dropping bombs on us right now. Think about what's in your life. What would motivate you to get that extra income, that extra cash flow each month to help smooth out the ups and downs of our industry? Think about what you've been through in your career so far. If you've got 10 years of experience, you've been through 3 downturns at this point. You can line up things when times are good to be more prepared when times are bad. And that's what we're all talking about here, is just that motivation, that why, because that'll take you so much further than, learning how to analyze a deal or anything like that.
Yeah,
so,
totally.
Brian, how can my listeners find out more about you?
Yeah, so I have a podcast of my own. It's called 12 Houses to Freedom. You can subscribe to that. And I also have a Facebook group by the same name. If you want to hop in there, I do a live training every Monday in there. You can ask me questions. If you want to connect with me and get some advice and get some help, then the Facebook group is the best place to join. Yeah,
great. Brian, I appreciate you being here today. And everyone, thank you for listening. We'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks for having me, man. Cheers.
Yes, sir.